Look, if you're going to belong to an organization that engages in advocacy, you can't have it both ways. You can't at once say, I know nothing about that, and then decline to say anything about it and belong to that organization. I think you ought to have to answer the question. There's an organization that you belong to called the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association. You've been a member of it for the last 7 years. It's abbreviated sometimes as NAPABA. NAPABA has made a number of comments over the years, and I understand that someone can belong to an organization without necessarily embracing every statement that that organization makes. Nonetheless, there are some of these statements that I'd like to know, I think others on the committee would like to know whether you agree with them. Among other things, NAPABA has publicly taken the position, quite aggressively, that no sanctuary jurisdiction, that is a city, municipality, or local unit of government, may be denied federal funds or may have any federal funds withheld on the basis of that entity refusing, declining to cooperate with federal immigration law enforcement authorities. So they take this opposition to any legislation that would withhold any federal funds to sanctuary cities. Even worse than that, NAPABA goes a second step and states that it believes that states and localities that decide to be sanctuary jurisdictions, that is, that don't honor ICE detainer requests, deserve, in fact, to be rewarded with additional financial support. Now, do you share this view, that sanctuary cities ought to be rewarded and never have federal funds withheld for refusing to cooperate with federal law enforcement?
Thank you, Senator. I think, as you may appreciate, NAPABA has several 100,000 members.
Sure.
I'm only one of those members. I'm not an officer director. I'm certainly not familiar with the class of statements that you're addressing or any press releases to that effect, and I've never read any NAPABA statement on these particular items that you've identified, so I can't...
So you were not aware they had taken this position?
I was not, Senator.
Do you agree with that position that they've taken?
Senator, I can't agree or disagree with the position because the issues you've identified, not only do they come up in our courts, they're likely to come up in my court.
Actually, I'd push back on that. This is a legislative determination. This is almost impossible that it could come up in your court. And keep in mind, this is a core function of the federal government. It is only the federal government, under Article 1, Section 8, that has the authority over our immigration laws and consequently over the enforcement of those laws. This is the prerogative of the federal government. And yet you're saying that a local jurisdiction that refuses to cooperate with that should not have federal funds withheld, or the entity is saying that rather. Now, a legislative determination, again, I don't think this is something that could or would come up. But let's move on. NAPABA has also opposed legislation, H.R. 734, the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act of 2023. Do you believe that males should compete against females in sports?
Again, Senator Lee, I can't comment one way or another about that topic, in part because in Long Island, just as an example, there are states and there are local and county legislation that's been passed in the recent weeks. Those laws are under challenge. Those cases are being brought in the Eastern District of New York. I simply cannot comment about issues that bear on litigation that are before me.
I understand that you're declining to answer. Keep in mind, you are a member of an entity that has made those statements. And if you can't comment on those statements, then perhaps, as a judge and as someone sitting for a nomination to be a lifetime appointed federal judge, then perhaps the answer should be that you shouldn't be a member of the organization. But it does raise an inference as to whether you do agree with them, and I note for the record that you're declining to do that. Now, NAPABA filed an amicus brief in a case called Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard. I'm sure you're familiar with that case. It went before the Supreme Court and was decided about a year ago. And in that brief, it called for, quote, consideration of race as a factor in college admissions. Do you believe that some students should either lose or have lower access to educational opportunities in higher education based on their race?
Well, I think, Senator, the Supreme Court has clearly said no. And it's my current oath, and if I'm...
You'll stick with that.
And
Now, NAPABA also called the Supreme Court's ruling in another case, 303 Creative versus Elenis. It called it misguided. Do you also believe that that decision was misguided? Do you share this view? And how should the case have been decided if it, in fact, were misguided?
Senator, I'm not familiar with that statement, but I never refer to Supreme Court decisions in that way because of my oath to follow them, and it would be inappropriate for me to disparage decisions and then uphold my oath to follow them.
Okay. My time's expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do note here, look, if you're going to belong to an organization that engages in advocacy, you can't have it both ways. You can't at once say, I know nothing about that, and then decline to say anything about it and belong to that organization. I think you ought to have to answer the question. Thank you.